Good morning. Ayin Beis, Volume 3. We're on page 1381. In explaining the difference between Mishnah and Gemara, or Talmud, in the language of Kabbalistic terminology, Chassidic terminology, that Mishnah, and it radiates a higher level of clarity, because the Mishnah was written and compiled by Rabbeinu HaKadosh, who received in an unbroken chain, orally, all the way back to Sinai, to Moshe Rabbeinu. So there's a clarity that was there, radiating in the oral Torah, coming from the written Torah, the clarity, the divine clarity within this Chochma, called the Chochma law, which is Mikra, the written Torah, shining through the six midas within Chochma, which is the six parts of Mishnah, into the Chochma Tata and Malchus of Mishnah. Talmud, on the other hand, explanation of the Mishnah, as he said in the previous page, that clarity, that vivid clarity of the divine wisdom within Torah became concealed due to the generational devolution, the opposite of evolution, more concealment due to the upheavals, the beginning of the exile, Golus, and so on. And all that, therefore, concealed that clarity of Chochma. So now, how do you achieve clarity? This comes through the process of the Chachmei Talmud, the Amoraim, the sages, struggling, exerting themselves to understand the contradictions, the questions, the things that were not clear to them in the Mishnah. The Balei Mishnah saw it clearly, but when you don't see it clearly, now you need to shine the light, and that's the effort. And in the process, they actually reach a deeper level of Chochma, like it is whenever you exert yourself, you reach deeper, what he calls Atzmus of Chochma. So the Mishnah has the Gilui of Chochma, the revelation of Chochma. When I say revelation, not necessarily that it's all understandable on our level. We're not talking about bina, comprehension, we're talking about clarity. So that's called the Gilui of Chochma. But Chochma has also its core, which is its Atzmus, the core essence of Chochma, which is what he called on top of page 1381. And this itself he explained in two ways. Either this is Ashiyesh b'Chochma of the Ayin of Keser Mamish, it has the Ayin, which means something that is beyond comprehension, or it's how Chochma, wisdom, is encompassed in its source of wisdom, which is one step lower, and we can understand it from what he says afterwards, which I'll sum up shortly. So that's where the Gemara reaches, where Talmud reaches. To explain that, he explained that every sphere, and in our case we're talking about Chochma, has levels. There's the revealed part of the sphere, in this case, the Gilui of Chochma Mishnah, where Mishnah originates from. And then there's the Etzem of Chochma, or the Mokar of Chochma. So first he brought the pardas that said that every sphere is divided by three elements, and he only brought two of the three. How it's what he called Chochma is be'erech shivya ela keser, shavel ela keser, that it is how Chochma is receiving and it radiating in its very sublime and very subtle form. And the second is the very core of Chochma itself. And then the Rebbe Rashab explained, and I'll just go over quickly, with another part of this, that there's 6 levels in each sphere, and he focuses really on the 3 higher levels of Chochma. What are the 3 higher levels of Chochma? One, the way it's within Keser, but it's concealed. The second, it's revealed within Keser, in its source. And 3, Gili b'mkema atzme, Gilua, how it gets revealed in its own location. So what do we have here? So the Gili in its own location, that's where the Mishnah realized, that's the Gili. But you have 2 levels higher than that in Chochma. So maybe that's the difference between Mokra Chochma and Etzema Chochma. He doesn't say that explicitly, but possibly. So that explains that, and that's where the Gemara reaches. Okay. In the parentheses afterwards, which we learned already, just to sum that up, so this is the level that we see, there's a level of Chochma Stima. Chochma Stima is Chochma within Keser. So we're talking here either the first or the second level within Chochma. Yeah, the first and second level. He says clearly, which corresponds to and originates from the fourth and fifth level within Keser. Because remember, Keser also has 6 levels. So the 3 higher levels of Keser are beyond. But the 3 lower levels of Keser are beginning to associate and give birth, so to speak, to the Chochma within it. So level 4 and 5 in Keser corresponds to 1 and 2 in Chochma. So that's the Pnimius Atzmis of Chochma, the way it's in a state of Ayin. It's not yet a Yesh. So what do we have from this? That Chochma has several levels. And not just it's not just higher than Atzilus, like the Ramah says, it's part of Atzilus. So Atzilus really begins from the supraconscious state, but it's still in the state of Ayin, in Keser, and then it's going to end up being revealed in Chochma in its own location, Chochma Gluya. Okay. Next point, that when it goes from the higher levels of Chochma to the revealed level of Chochma, it's the Chochma Ma'ayin to Matzah. It goes through a tzimtzum, because it's going from Ayin to Yesh. Remember, to use a little more Chabad words to explain it, there's Chochma, the way what radiates in Chochma is a clarity. That's already even the Chochma Gluya and the Mishnah. But as you go higher levels, there's Chochma where it experiences a reality greater than itself, a higher reality. That higher reality is godliness. In Keser, Keser is completely beyond the conscious. It's a superconscious state because the higher reality dominates. Within that, you already have the genesis of the seed of Chochma beginning to I don't say sprout, but to begin to develop. But it's all still the Ayin. So it's still in the state not of a Chochma of intelligence, it's the higher reality. Then that will come into intelligence, and that's when it becomes Mishnah. Gemara, through the exertion and effort, can reach even deeper to the concealed supraconscious state. Basically, he's going to say that at the end of the paragraph, but I'm just putting it into context here. Okay, so when Mishnah, the Gili of Chochma, comes from supraconscious states of Chochma, that goes through a tzimtzum and expressed as Chochma Ma'ayin Timotza. That's why Mishnah is revealed, because to reveal from a state where it's concealed, that needs a tzimtzum. And then in the parentheses, he explained the 3 levels of Chochma, Ma'ayin, and Timotza. That these 3 words indicate on the 3 levels within Chochma that we're discussing. Timotza, he says, is Yesod Abba. That's already the Chochma as it is in the process, the lowest level within Chochma. You say the Yesod within Chochma. Afterwards, he'll explain that this is all the 6 midas. This is Chochma as it's revealed. And this is already Seichel, intelligence. Chochma Ma'ayin. The Ayin is Chochma as it's included in Keser, which he calls, the level equation. Let me just read it inside. Ayin Chochma Kameshum Kedesh B'chinas Ayin. And Chochma Ma'ayin is Chochma, which is already Gilead Chochma, but it's not Chochma Proteus. So what you have is Chochma is first in a state where it's not even, it doesn't yet exist in any conscious way. Then it comes into a conscious state, and he explained that in 2 ways. One is the intelligence in your mind, even when you're not focusing or concentrating on something. And then there's the Chochma where it actually develops an idea, comes into a specific detail. The second way he explained it is the difference between Shem HaEtzem, Shem HaTeir, and Shem HaPu'ula. So Shem HaEtzem is the way Chochma is, apparently, the way it's in the state of Ayin. The essence of it, which is experiencing a higher reality, it's not yet a conscious intelligence. Shem HaTorah is already conscious intelligence. And Shem HaPa'ula is when it comes into detail, into details. And that is Yesod Abba, or in general, the 6 midas. Shem HaPa'ula, the midas. And these 2 explanations also correspond to the 2 meanings in bara. When you say bara, from the word bria, creation, so that's the 2nd level, Chochma becoming a yesh from an ayin, and bara from the word gili, it comes from the yesh, then comes in a revealed state. Yeah. V'chochma ma'ayin u'b'chinas atzmusa, b'chinas ha'gimel shebechochma shebepardasham. So the 3rd level in Chochma that he described before, where it is already an entity of its own, that is the middle level. Ayin is Chochma is not yet an entity in its own, it's still within Keser. So it's the 1st and 2nd levels of Chochma. Then Chochma becomes an entity of its own, which is the 3rd level of Chochma, that from based on the Pardes. And Timacha is a level beneath that. It's not just a separate entity, but it's actually a revealed entity in details. And that's where we stopped. And I want to just say one thing before we continue. He doesn't say it explicitly, but I was wondering, where does Mikra fit in here? If Mishnah is the Gilui in Chochma, the middays of Chochma, and Gemara reaches deeper into the etzem of Chochma, or the source of Chochma in the Ayin and Keser, maybe the 2 levels of Chochma Stima. So where's Mikra? We learned earlier that Mikra is rooted in Chabad of Atzilus. And because Chabad is higher than Hasaga, higher than comprehension, he said this explicitly back on the bottom of page 1365. He said that Chabad Atzilus, Mokim Naili Sodas Bahari Kedesh, Chinas Ayinu Lamayla Masaga. He identified Mikra with a level of Ayin, how Chochma relates to Ayin. So is Mikra the higher levels of Chochma higher than Mishnah? That's Begili. And Gemara is able to reach into like the root of where Mikra is sourced? Or is the Gemara reach even higher than the source of Mikra itself? Just pointing out this question, which is not clear, because we don't know exactly where Mikra is located. But he did say at the bottom of the page there that it's higher than Asoga. So it sounds very much like the Ayin, the Ma of Chochma. But it could be that there's another level that he didn't spell out here. Or maybe it's one of these levels, and maybe Gemara goes even higher or not. That's just wanted to point that out. And maybe it'll become more apparent when we learn further. But in thinking about the whole picture, I was just wondering that point.
It's from Keser, we learned, didn't we?
If Gemara reaches into Keser, into the Ayin of Chochma, so where's Mikra? Mishnah is the Gili of Chochma, the 3rd level. Sorry, the second Mishnah is the 3rd. Yeah, the 3rd level of Chochma, where it's already revealed and in detail. Yeah. No, I'm sorry. Mishnah is even lower than that. The second, the Chochma that becomes a yesh, that's not yet in detail, or it's still like the seichel in the mind. He called that. We just learned he called that the 3rd level. So he doesn't mention Mikra here. So I was just wondering where Mikra would fit in. That's all. You want to say something?
Probably Mikra is higher than all of this. Mishnah is already Gilui.
I'm glad you added the word. I'm glad you added the word probably, but not necessarily the case. It would make sense that Mikra is the highest because it's Torah Shebiksav Mamish coming from Hashem. But remember, Mishnah is also higher than Gemara, and yet the Gemara, through the Yigiyah from the Cheshech, you reach deeper level. Anyway, it could very well be Rebbe Rashab is going to say it. I was just thinking as we were learning where exactly, but so it's fine. Let's leave it be. We don't need to resolve it right now because it could make arguments both ways. Remember, we still have to go back to explain, if you recall, Mikra is Chabad, rooted in the Chabad of Atzilus. Mishnah in Chagas, and Talmud in Nehi of Atzilus. And then when it comes into the worlds, Chabad goes in Asiya, Mikra is in Asiya. Mishnah, Chagas goes into Yitzira, and Talmud rooted in Nehi, goes into Bria. But Bria, we learned also, was a world of Choshech. So all this, I'm sure, is going to come together, and that's when we'll fully understand it. I just wanted to point it out as we're talking about the levels of Chochma, which is which here. Remember, at the end of the day, it's also Torah Achas. We're talking about one Torah here. It's not like three separate Torahs, God forbid. So they're all coming from God. The question is, how much is Bislapshus and what levels are they revealing? So no doubt, everything comes from Mikra. Lekamida, what's the question? The Leida Miza Baraisa. What?
The Leida Miza.
Right. Lekamida, there's nothing in the Gemara and the Mishnah, the Leida Miza Baraisa. Everything starts from Mikra, that we know. The question is more how revealed it is. In Mikra, he said before, Moshe Rabbeinu, when he heard of Pasuk in the Torah, he saw all the details in it. We can't see it. So it's not just a question. We know that the Gilui is there, but like we learned, Chochma is clarity, but only in the world of Chochma. The question is whether we can get the clarity also in the world where there's no clarity. So when you do that, in a way you reach deeper. It's like, in a way, when you learn Gemara, you reveal the deeper source of Mishnah and Mikra. That's the Vart. It's not the competition here. It's the Gemara causes them, by struggling, they're able to go into the source of where the Mishnah comes from and where the Mikra comes from, which is the highest levels of Chochma. That's how I would probably explain it. Because at the end of the day, from a pasuk, as divine as it is, you can't derive a halacha. We don't have the clarity that Gemara provides. I say clarity, I don't mean divine clarity. I mean clarity in our terms, in a state of darkness, when there's a min nismayat alavavus. But we'll learn more. I just wanted to just point that out. And so let's continue learning, unless somebody wants to ask something or say something.
The whole thing makes sense because we learned that the highest sources, such as Nikra, goes down to the lowest. And it's a constant thing with this. And I don't think it should be a problem. We just have to identify whether you're talking about source or...
Yeah, absolutely. There's no question. I'm just trying to place where Mikra exactly is. If Mishnah is the Gilui of Chochma, like he said, the Mides, and Gemara reaches into the Ayin, the two higher levels of Chochma that are not yet, one is, there's consciousness, but it's not in detail and revealed, and one is even super consciousness. I was just wondering where Mikra goes. It's all. One more thing I want to say, that just keep in mind, even though these are subtle levels in the spheres, but the bottom line is always important to understand this. When a teacher says an idea, as clear as it is in the teacher's mind, when the student struggles with it and asks questions and probes, precisely because he's not on the level of the teacher, he's able to draw out deeper wisdom, even from the teacher himself. Like we say, "Mitamide yesem kula." When they asked the Tana, they said, "Where did you learn most?" He said, he learned much. Harbe mirei beisai. He learned much from his teachers, even more from his chaverai, from his friends, his colleagues. V'mitamide yesem kula. And from my students, I learned most. So the obvious question is, what do you mean you learn most? Your teachers, you learn more from your students than from your teachers? More from your student than from your Rebbe? Yeah, because the students, because they're at a lower level, they elicit more because they ask questions. And when you have to explain something, you have to bring a light to a more distant place, you need to have stronger light. The light that comes from the teacher is very apparent, is right near you. So it's very powerful. The light from the friends is stronger because it's now coming from your equal status. But Matamid, he doesn't bring this example, so I'm careful to say, I don't know if it's exactly the idea we're talking, but it has a similar resonating element to it, which is that when you have to bring something to a darker place and clarify, you need to reach into a deeper place. Just like Moshe Rabbeinu, when he was on the mountain, he had to reach into a deeper place in Hashem. You give him midas harachimim that he was able to elicit because the chet ha'egel. He would never have done that if the Jews had never sinned. So it was essentially Yom Kippur, therefore, is the highest day because he was able to reach a place, but it came due to a setback. It came from a darkness. but that causes you to reach deeper into the etzem. Again, it's not exactly because that's tshuva. And here we're talking in Chochma. In the Chochma itself, in Torah, which is Mamayil Lamata. But in Torah itself, we have, like we said, there's more less and when there's less and you have to bring the Torah there, you have to reach to deeper levels within Torah itself. Or in the words here, within Chochma itself. That's a. So let's continue now reading. So on the line after the parentheses, V'timotzo b'chinas hamidah shebechochma shu b'chinas hagilui. Okay. So we'll continue. The pages can be found at ayinbeis.com. Remember, before the parentheses, the last line was that Chochma ma'ayin timotza that you need to have at Tzimtzum. The yesh, Chochma has now become a yesh, meaning substance, something tangible, compared to the ayin when Chochma is within Keser, or Chochma, the Keser is radiating within it, and then it doesn't even feel even the spark of an idea. So even the spark is called already yesh. I mentioned yesterday that Bina is obviously a far more full-blown yesh compared to Chochma. But in Chochma itself, there's also subtly these levels. So now he says, so there's at Tzimtzum, Chochma ma'ayin timotza, like he said at Tzimtzum, Gili ha-Chochma memekeda, for Chochma to come from its source, ayidei at Tzimtzum. Yesh from ayin. And even though we said yesh from ayin, or also even Gili from helam, that's also a form of a tzimtzum, because you need to conceal the higher level to reveal the next level. So he brings now a pasuk where he talks about Moshe Rabbeinu, which demonstrates this. Moshe nigish el harofel. That Moshe approached the cloud. Harofel is a cloud. A cloud is like a dark cloud. So, I mean, obviously, physically, that was the case, but what does it mean spiritually? That Moshe approached the darkness. What does that mean? That when Moshe approached Arafel, this state of this dark cloud, he was approaching the helam of Chochma. In other words, Moshe was drawing from the higher level of Chochma, the helam, how it's in the state of ayin. And then when we say that Chochma then descends and gets revealed, because remember, Moshe received from that higher level, but then he came to teach it and reveal it. This is a state of tzimtzum. So I know it sounds a little like, in the wording, it sounds a little paradoxical. Which is the tzimtzum? Is it the concealment that he's of helam of Chochma, or the concealment of the helam of Chochma in order to get gili? So the truth is the latter. Because when you need to bring down something from a deeper superconscious level, what I'm calling superconscious, or a concealed state where Chochma is not yet revealed, like we learned, the higher levels of Chochma, they're still emerging, you need a tzimtzum. Similar to when a child, the fetus develops and it's ready to give birth, there needs to be a tzimtzum. The child has to go through a certain state, through the canal. It's a form of concealment in order for it to emerge. Because the intensity, because remember, the helam that we're talking about is not helam be'etzem in the sense helam in a negative way. It's not a helam like golus. It's a helam because it's higher than gili. It's a superconscious state. It's not defined by parameters that are revealed. So when you want to bring something from, let's say, this concealment within the teacher has to go through a tzimtzum in order to bring it into revelation. Just like if I want to bring from my thoughts into my speech, so thoughts are concealed. You don't know my thoughts. So in order to get from thought to speech, I need to go through a tzimtzum. I need to conceal the intensity of my thoughts and then channel it into words that reveal, and you can hear them, and they become tangible and expressed. That's essentially what he's saying. So that's the tzimtzum we're referring to here. So the tzimtzum legabe helam hachachma klul b'mkeda. the way Chochma is encompassed in its source, which we learned before is Ayin of Keser, whatever level, the first level, the second level, to come now into the level of Gilui, that we can understand it, which of course he's saying is the Vav Midas of Chochma. Chochma now coming into a Seichel that we can, a specific Seichel. Well, first, I'm sorry, Chochma coming into Gilui in general, that there's consciousness, and then coming into specifics, the Midas, that needs a Tzimtzum. Yet, but nevertheless, even with this Tzimtzum, it's still Chochma. We haven't gone to Bina yet. It's still Chochma, and as we learned earlier, even the lowest levels of Chochma, Yesod Abba, Yesod Chochma, even the Nekudas HaSkola, which is already a tangible idea, it still has the Hanocha Sichlis. It still resonates with the higher truth. It just now become more manifest in something called intelligence. But it's not like removed from its source. It's just emerged from its source. So now he's going to explain how that's the level of Mishnah, and with the Tzimtzum even, it still radiates with the clarity of Chochma. So he says now, Rak she'im kol zeh. However, or Rak, only with all this, Bechinas Oyer zeh mitzumtzum, this diminished level of Oyer that came from states that were concealed before, Ba b'derech birur, they come in a form of clarity. So huvrar bechinas tamtzis hanivrar ke'er bahir. It's not a concealment, a tzimtzum like the tzimtzum that comes in Golus, where we actually lose the clarity. Here, the tzimtzum is only in order to reveal it, but it doesn't lose the resonating clarity. So it's b'der bir shehuvra bechinas tamtzis hadover, hanivra rather. It becomes like the condensed form of that which is nivra, which is clarified. Ka'ir boher, shines like a radiant light, like a bright light. So with its tzimtzum and everything, Chochma is still Chochma. And he gives an example for this, and this is going to explain Mishnah. Hu al derech moshel. And this is like, for example, b'chochem gadol, a great sage, a great wise, a very wise person, a great chochem, great wise one. Be'emek helam ha'chochma. What it consists of his greatness? That he has a be'emek helam ha'chochma. He has an understanding of the depth in the helam of chochma, not just on the reveal level, from the source. So, like we discussed yesterday, you could have someone who's a brilliant teacher and explaining things, but he may not be as wise as someone who understands the ideas as they flow from the source, from the superconscious into the conscious. And he says, "V'hainu." He spells out what this means. Hainu mishu chochma mitzad etzem koyach chochmase. Shu chochem, rather, someone who's wise due to the etzem koyach chochmase, the very essence of the koyach of chochma. Let me explain what that means. This is an expression that was used by the Rabbein about certain chassidim. So you could say someone's a chacham, he's a wise person. When we say someone's a chacham be'etzem koyach chachmosei, I believe there's even a left Friedrich Rebbe. I remember Rebbe speaking about it once. I don't remember the details, but he speaks about when that unique title. Let's just analyze the words. It's not just a wise person. Be'etzem koyach chachmosei, he's wired. His very chachma within him is a very fundamental one. So I'm trying to find the words for it. So as I said, you could have people who have a wisdom. Let me start with chesed. It's easier with chesed, then I'll explain chochma. This was explained in volume 1, now that I remember, now that I'm thinking about it. You could have a person who's doing chesed. Remember, Shema Pu'ula. He's doing chesed. It's a kind, but do you say he's a kind person or he's doing kind things? Thing with chochma. A person could be expressing wisdom, but not necessarily you're going to give him the Shema Torah or the Shema Etzem that he's a wise person. It's very different. A person who's learning Torah, even if he's not the wisest person, in effect right now, let's call it the verb of Chochma is there. He's exercising the faculty of wisdom. But then there's the noun, a state of being. There's a person who fundamentally is a very wise person. Even if he's not expressing it, that's how he is. He was created that way. Could be genetic, could be a blessing. So etzem koyach chachmase means that etzem koyach chachmase is on a very profound and higher level. So this is what he's talking about, Chocham Gadol. Etzem koyach chachmase. V'hu b'chinas shema etzem, not shema pa'ula. We're not talking about the action of being wise. We're talking about the wiring. The S is describing the essence of who you are. So the fact that somebody says divrei chochma, you could say the pa'ula is there, but you're not going to say the shema etzem. In this level of a chocham be'etzem. Shema etzem the chochma uka chochma shlema. Like we speak about the wisdom of Shlema. We don't just say Shlema was a wise person who had wisdom. A lot of people had wisdom. Diksiv v'Hashem nosan chochma l'Shlema. Why say chochma kol adam? God gave him a special gift, a gift of wisdom. When Hashem asked him, what does he want? So he didn't ask for riches, he didn't ask for other things, he asked for wisdom. That means he got a gift. Not just that he had intelligence. He had intelligence, even to ask that, even make that request needed intelligence. But clearly he got a higher state, like basically a gift called Chochma. As explained elsewhere, right. Also explained above. This is Le'il is quite a way back. I'm almost sure in volume 2 for sure, and volume 1 I think as well. That we have to find it. But bottom line is, this is all a mushal. So we're talking about a person on that higher state of intelligence. It's like someone made of a different piece of cloth. Not, just, you see, they just have a different level of intelligence. Now he's continuing with the example. Now, a person like that, who's clarifying any particular concept, any idea, with what? With this core power that he has. So Shlomo Melech is analyzing an idea as well, and at the same time, someone else who's an intelligent person doing so. It's not going to be the same. Umevie, he brings it. He through his clarification, he derives from it, or he brings it la'ir to light. Begili eisi shebehen mechuvan bebchinas shebehen mechaven or mechuvan. One of the two. So a person like that, when he clarifies something, it's of a different dimension. It's like often you go, let's say, to a medical expert for a diagnosis. The doctor looks at it and so on. I remember someone telling me they had a pain. It was like a pain, like, I think it was a shoulder pain or something like that. And the person went to several doctors and no one could figure it out. Then they finally said, go to a doctor in New York. He's an expert. Within 5 seconds, the doctor diagnosed it. Now, what was the difference between them? Of course, you could say it's experience. But there's also, even if wise people look at something, then you come to another caliber, different paradigm, a different level of intelligence. I'm only using that could be, as I said, experience. It may not be purely intelligence. But the point being, in wisdom, you could have wise people, then you go to someone, you see they have a whole different way of looking at it. So someone like that, when he clarifies as an idea, but etzem koyach chachmase, he brings it to light in words and letters that are radiating and are aligned with the depth of the wisdom as it is in its source. Not everyone can do that. That's why you'll find some people will give good advice. They may give wise counsel, but it's not necessarily aligned with the highest level. And that's why it could be, I'm saying mistaken, but not as clear as someone who has that connection. V'zeh inyan ha-Mishnah. That's the Mishnah. The Baalei Mishnah were on this level. It was a Chochma Begoli, because we're talking about the Vav Midas, the 6 Shisha Sidre Mishnah, the 6 orders of Mishnah. So it's Gili, but it's not a Gili Stam. It's a line because it's like this Chocham Gadol, but Etzem Koyach Chachmase, the Zayin HaMishnah, It's Gilui Eira Chochma. Remember, we're not talking about Gemara yet. Sheba b'chinas Chochma Brura. That comes to us in a very clear, clarified, crystallized way. So now he's summing up the conclusion of this whole discussion. That's Chochma Gluya. Like he said at the top of the page and the bottom of last page, that you have there a clarity because it's shining with a clarity, but it's a clarity only by them. Once you go to a stage where that clarity got concealed, in other words, we don't have Chachamim like that. We're not talking about Rabbeinu HaKadosh. We're not talking about people who have that level of clarity. So now what happens? So now he continues. Basically, once it's Nesalim, that Eira Chochma, the Gili of Chochma, so now that whole Gili. So you could think, okay, you know what? We're now in a state of concealment. We don't have such clarity. Comes the Gemara, Talmud, then the Talmud, which comes in the next generation, where that oil was concealed, Shemevar umalabenes Mishnah, which clarifies and crystallizes the Mishnah. Lahoitzi eira emes, to draw out the light of truth, the clarity of truth, but this time it has to come from the bottom with human intelligence. It's not just a clarity that was given as a gift. Like you said in the previous page, this is now coming through reasoning and through analysis and intelligence, where they ask the questions. It's not just when do you begin reading Shema in the evening? So the Tanoim in the Mishnah, they received the clear answer when the Kohanim entered to eat the Truma, allowed to enter and eat the Truma. The Amoraim, now the Gemara asks, why do you say that? The Gemara has to understand it because it's a lower level. But this is now creating a clarity and crystallization through Tam v'Seichel. Like I said in the previous page, look at the top of 1380. That Tanoim Heir MS Shukain V'lo Yitzchichim Klal Tam Lezeh. Al Kashen Salam Eira Chochma. Now we need reasoning. Now we need to struggle with it. Now we need to probe and analyze and discovery and all the questions and arguments and so on. He's now not saying all that language because he's relying, we learned it before. That's why I'm referring to it. So now it's coming out of Tam v'Seichel. They have pilpul, and through a debate and discussion, bikushis, with questions, vistiris, contradictions. This is due to the concealment and the darkness. This is not the helam that we talked about before, the helam of Chochma, high super conscious, or the tzimtzum to bring it to Gili. There, it's all on higher level. Now it's a helam legriyusa. It's a concealment due to the lack of clarity. Ulatar is called davar, and the Talmud is involved and concerned with answering every matter. But he's also using with depth of intelligence, of chochma, of wisdom and intelligence. And until these sages of the Talmud arrive to the truth, and they come and bring the truth to light. But this is coming now through a whole process, not like the Mishnah that, in a sense, was downloaded and has a clarity because etzem koyach achmaseh. Here it's coming through the process of discussion, argument, questions, and so on. So he says, now this, zeu shenimshach mebchinas helam u'mokar hachachma. So to reach clarity now, when you don't have that clarity, the ability to do so, he says, that's for nimshach mebchinas helam u'mokar hachachma. It's coming from the concealment and the source of chachma, higher than the gili of chachma. Kamoi shehi b'mkeira, the way chachma is in its source, shalamayla mebchinas hagili. That's higher than the Gili in the Mishnah, than revealed. So the Mishnah is also coming from that place. But in the Mishnah, the clarity is there. You don't have to reveal the concealment. It shines, it flows from the superconscious into the conscious. Here, you have to go into the superconductor. You have to like strike the Flintstone to get sparks that you would not have gotten on your own. Like he said earlier, the expression was also very strong words. I just want to read it again. He said, I'm reading the bottom of 1380. Because those Chachmei Talmud reached into the core of Chochma, it's the same idea, just more words that he used a little earlier, which is all coming together now. And with that, we conclude the paragraph, but it's not over. If you see the next line, Ubira Inyan. It's going to explain this now further because obviously we need to really understand, because you could ask the question, so what's going on here? The Tanoim, the Mishnah, Baalei Mishnah, had greater minds, had greater clarity. And yet, through learning Gemara, coming from a dark place where we have less clarity, we actually achieve higher levels of connection to the godliness and to the clarity of the emes of Torah than they did. So we already explained it, like Talmid Yeshim Kulam, or I gave the other examples. But still, he's going to explain this for quite, let me see here. This is going to go now till 1386. So we have now a good 5 pages where he's going to explain this more elaborately. So it's not over by any means. And but he's laid out the main components, of course, and the plot thickens and develops. So I'll stop here. Let's take questions. Let's try to get more clarity, more birur, libun. Yeah. Being that it's we're just coming from Rosh Chodesh Kislev, I mean, this reminds me a bit of the expression in Torah Shalom about Yutas Kislev. So the Rebbe Rashab says, interesting expression, he says, it's difficult to say, those are the words he uses, Sheshver Zog, it's difficult to say, but we can say that when the Alter Rebbe was imprisoned, it was like the Gemara says that the olive does not produce its best oil until you press it. It doesn't produce oil until you press it. You know, just hold an olive in your hand or on the table. You may see something, but it's not going to derive the oil, to extract oil, you have to press it. Basically saying that the Alter Rebbe, the prison, was like the pressure that brought out the best oil from the Alter Rebbe. The Chassidus that came afterwards, Chabad Chassidus, the development of it, and so on. So I was just thinking, I'm not saying it's exactly, but the idea is, and before the Alter Rebbe was not delivering high levels of Chabad, of Chassidus, the answer is, of course he was. And it was also actually short, like Mishnah. We have some of it, Maimorim Ketzorim, short statements. They were like the Baal Shem Tov of the Maggid, a little longer. Besides Tanya, everything was very brief. In it, it was concentrated tremendous amount of power and intelligence, but you couldn't see it on your own, or at least most people couldn't. Some Chassidim, I guess, were able to see it, just like some people could look at Mishnah and understand it there. But the pressure, which came from a bad place, he was in prison. You can imagine he was for 53 days in prison, which was not a pleasant place to be, alone with anti-Semites, guards, the conditions, etc., was not exactly respectful. And all the tsar that he had from that. And yet, what happened was that pressure brought out from him levels of Chochma that were even deeper than the Chochma that was there before. It just came to mind as we're discussing it. I think it's a good example. Again, I'm not going to say it's a perfect example, but it definitely is in this realm. But as I said, let's hear if any questions or any comments. All good? Okay. Is it because I explained it so well, or is it because I explained it so terrible?
You explained it very well.
I was fishing for a compliment.
You got it.
No, that was a joke.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to gauge where we're at here,
Personally, I still don't understand how the Bale Talmud, the Amoraim, can discern those laws, rules, principles. Not that how they can't do it. I think they can by using logic and derivations, using mikra, etc. And that to me is not my question, but how they can come out and with different conclusions and all be right, all still be correct. That I still can't wrap my head around.
Where did we discuss that they're all correct? Where, what are you referring to? What line?
Well, nothing here. That's my understanding when I've learned Gemara is that they can come down with different.
Yeah, but that's a question in a different topic. What does that have to do with our conversation here?
Well, the Amoraim, they're deriving the Chochma.
No, I'm not saying that's not a question. It's a legitimate question, but how does it relate to what we're discussing? That's what I'm asking.
Only in the sense that they're deriving something, they're bringing down from what's concealed, but they're coming out in different. They're coming out with different conclusions. So, you say when you're more yagir, when you strive harder, when you strike the flint harder, you get the truth coming out, but you also get different conclusions, and somehow they're all right.
Yeah, but really, I don't understand the association. As I said, it's a legitimate question in general. The Gemara says in Eruvin, Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim
It
chaim.
says that Talmud shemavar v'lemavar es Mishnah lotzi or ha'emes, the light of truth al yedei hatam v'asechel. They're drawing out the light of truth through their through reasoning and through reason and logic. And
Right.
that says they're drawing out the truth, and I'm saying you have many opinions in there that are contrary to each other, and yet they're all correct. So that's hard to wrap your mind around. It's right there.
But anyway, I would refer you back to page 1373,
Yeah.
where you explicitly discussed that, how there can be different opinions, and said even in the Mishnah there are different opinions, and even in the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, Hashem said different opinions, and he explained that the truth of seichel, when it's conveyed, it comes in many kavim. It's like an artist doesn't just create one piece of art. Art is about diversity. So the diverse opinions are all part of the expression of truths.
Uh-huh.
Now, when it comes to halacha is another story. You can only behave in one way.
Right.
But the idea is, he actually said those words. He said, Shleimus HaSeichel, let's say, the words he used were that Shleimus hu b'chinas hakavim dafke, loikeshu b'kav echad. The shleimus of Seichel is precisely when you have different approaches and different opinions.
Where is that, by the way?
1373,
Okay.
middle of the page.
Thank you.
So I would suggest reading that, where he addresses this issue. Because what you're asking is a very different question. You're asking, can MS be different opinions? And the answer is yes, it could be. Clarity does not mean one opinion. Clarity means that you achieve clarity, and it could be there are different opinions. That's part of the clarity too.
Like all the colors, like a prism. You split the light, you have all these different colors, it's all light. I got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's halacha is another story. How do you can't do two things at once. You could either it's prohibited or it's not prohibited. But that's a bigger discussion, which also discussed in the beginning of Ayin Beis. How could Shammai and Hillel, Gevura and Chesed? So really it comes down, each one is addressing a different scenario, a different world, the world of Chesed, the world of Gevura. But yeah. Okay. Are there any other questions at the bottom? Finishing the paragraph here at the bottom of page 1381. And the next section, as I said, is going to be more elaboration on this. So we have a lot more to go here. I think it's going to get clearer and clearer. It's beautiful. It ultimately Torah's clarity, even the place of darkness. And I keep going back. It's fascinating to me because tefillah from the bottom up is coming from the darkness to the light. Here we're talking about bringing the light into a state of darkness in Torah. And then there's the process of einoid, where the darkness itself propels you, the distress propels you. So I hope I think that's where we're really going to come together at the end of the story. Just thinking out loud here. Okay, so we'll stop here. End of paragraph 13.